optimize yours. And today I'm excited to have Emily Mucken here. She's a Netflix recruiter, but you come from a lot of other different companies. Do you want to give a quick introduction on your story a little bit?
Yes, I would love to. Where do I want to start? um, so I'm actually going to start with something non-traditional. I'm going to start with therapy. So I had been at a point in my life to dive into, this will have to do with like making the leap into a contract role and where the opportunities it got me, all of that. I had been at a point post-divorce. I was in a really bad relationship and all of a sudden was really finding myself. Probably 7 years ago, all of a sudden I'm living in a tiny apartment with my 2 kids. I'm in a nonprofit job that's like just frankly wasn't paying enough to survive on with supporting the kids on my own, and had been really playing it small in my job, but also in my life. And so the one thing I want to start with is it's really hard to be more and do better and get bigger opportunities and speak. I mean, I'm speaking up in meetings now, and even when my voice is shaking, and everything that I've been able to do has been a result of the inside job that I started with on working on myself, being not afraid to embrace my imperfections, mistakes, things like that. So I would say get a solid foundation before you start. It's all an inside job, and how you work on yourself on the inside will reflect on the outside on your career, and how you show up at work. So thank you for listening to my little pep talk there, but I'm a big believer in taking care of yourself, doing therapy, getting the support that you need to do, however that looks for you. Okay, so I'm going to dive right in. So now you know how I was playing small and at a crisis point in my life. And then I went from a company called Peace Health, nonprofit company. I was there for 9 years. Then I took a kind of a lateral move that just frankly just paid a little bit more money, to be able to just squeak by. Now I could actually pay my bills, but just barely. And was trying to work my way up there, but found that I just wasn't going to be, it was the kind of job where people just kind of sit and keep the seat warm. And as I continued to work on myself as a person, I wanted more. I wanted to find a fuller expression of myself in my life. And it became more important to me and financially critical to find a fuller expression of myself in my career. And frankly, just to earn more money. And where I was at, I really plateaued. I was living in Portland, Oregon. I joined all these recruiter networks and had kind of put feelers out, and there just wasn't anywhere else to really go. Everyone else that I was working with laterally, I'll be really honest, they were all like 2-income households and they could afford to be making what they were making. And also they were fine with doing what they were doing, which was just kind of coming in, doing their job and going home. But that started to just not interest me anymore. So here's the problem that I was trying to solve. I wanted to make a leap to a bigger company where I could grow, where I could use more of my capabilities and skills, where I could think bigger, where I could experiment and try new things. And I'm going back to the money just because that's something we don't all talk about, but that was a reality for me. I needed to have a stronger financial future for myself and for my family. And I knew that that could be found by leaping from one of these smaller mid-sized companies to a big company. They also have more career paths available. People come and go all the time. Then there's a supervisor role that opens. There's a lead role. There's a manager role. Small companies and nonprofit companies a lot of times just don't have the capability to do that. So I decided to move to Seattle, where there was a much more robust recruiting community. And spoiler alert, this is pre-COVID, so relocation was required. What happened was I ended up applying to jobs for over a year. And here I was a recruiter with at this point, 8-9 years of solid experience on my resume. But these big companies, again, these are all my opinions and this is just my experience. But let's be real, there's still a lot of bias in hiring, and companies aren't as willing, especially when they have, as my mom would say, the pick of the litter. When they can have any candidate, they're not probably going to reach back out to the applicant from the small mid-sized company who's never worked at scale, who hasn't solved complex problems. Hey, I might have those capabilities, but they're not going to take a chance if they're also getting if Amazon's getting an application from a recruiter who's already at Facebook, something like that. So I was just really shocked when I was trying to make this move to Seattle and grow my career that a solid recruiter like myself wasn't getting my foot in the door. I wasn't getting any kind of call back. So the way that I was able to get my foot in the door, I'll just jump straight to the end, was I ended up taking a contract role as a contract recruiter at Amazon. I will go through how I got it, other ways to get a contract job, what it was actually like I'll talk to you all like you're my friends or my siblings. So I'm going to be pretty brutal. And so you know what you're getting yourself into potentially. And then obviously it worked out for me, but also some real downsides and risks and things that I saw others go through as well. So jumping right in, one way that I was able to quickly drum up interviews was by contacting staffing agencies. It's actually pretty easy to find them. One, I'd already been on LinkedIn. I'm a recruiter, so I knew recruiters with different agencies. And so I already had a few names in mind, like, hey, I'm going to contact, Kathy at Seattle Staffing, because I've seen her on LinkedIn. But I also, to be honest with you, just did a Google search of like search firms, Seattle, Washington, staffing agency. Search firm seemed to bring up more professional companies. Staffing agency, that term can work for you, but it might also bring up more high volume agencies. So anyway, search firm was a good search term on Google. And so that could be something super easy to do, is just type in search firms, Kentucky or wherever you're looking for jobs or wherever you want to go. And how it works is, and how they got me interviews after me trying on my own unsuccessfully for several months, was you don't pay anything. So make sure that, you clarify that up front. But in my experience, the person paying is actually the company who's paying the agency, meaning Amazon has a ton of recruiter openings, for example, and then they pay ABC Staffing to help them fill these roles with contractors. So, because the need can fluctuate. So they just outsource filling contractor roles. So once I contacted agencies, you can just submit your resume on their website a lot of times, send them an email. There's a contact email. They'll get back to you. They'll get back to you like the big companies won't, because they get paid based on placing you. They also got me interviews with opportunities outside of recruiting, because I was actually looking to not be a recruiter anymore, because sometimes the job is, I had to tell 2 people today that they weren't getting a job, and it's really hard sometimes. Anyway, so I was like, I want to be a sales manager. What was I thinking? Anyway.
I could say thank you for following up with your candidates, though, because there's so much waiting to hear. Even if it's hard on you, it's such a relief for candidates to have clarity. So thank you.
You're welcome. And also, having been, I think one of the things that makes me a reasonably okay recruiter is that I have been a job seeker. And so I completely understand what that's like to be left being ghosted, because it happened to me countless times during this great leap to Seattle and unlocking my career. So I interviewed for all these different roles with different companies. Some of them were smaller, but they were also a lot more upfront about pay. Like, hey, this pays $70,000. It comes with this kind of, stipend, and you'll get this kind of bonus, and blah blah blah. And the staffing agency also helped me prepare, or these search firms, they also helped me prepare for the interview, because again, unlike these corporate jobs where you apply directly, the agency really wants to get you hired as a contractor, because they make money when you get hired. So they would do prep calls with me, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. There are some downsides though. So one, yes, it got my foot in the door. It got me some activity very quickly. The downsides are that these are contract roles. So you want to ask upfront, like, how long is the contract? Because I don't want a 2-week contract unless I just really need to put some food on the table and I don't have a job. But for me, it was like, I have a job. I really need to make a move eventually, but I can't quit my job for a 2-week contract and then have nothing left to feed my kids with. And so asking things like, how long's the contract? Tell me more about the compensation. What is the company looking for in a successful candidate? And just making sure you gather as much information as you can up front. Because here's the thing. they will also, these agencies or search firms, they might also try to kind of sell you on a role. So you need to think for yourself and push back. And also, you're their customer. So if at any point you hesitate or you feel like this isn't quite right, don't take that interview. So they can line you up with other clients with other interviews. But if they're trying to push you in a direction that just doesn't feel right, because that happened to me with one agency, they didn't really have an opportunity that lined up with my interests, but they were like, they really wanted to push me forward because I think I was coming across well over the phone. I had a reasonably good resume. And so just be cautious, advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to push back. I'm going to give you a quick unsolicited advice. Usually my most experienced and what I would say like high value candidates are the ones who actually push back the most and ask the most clarifying questions because they know they're awesome. It's the candidates who are really insecure and who are like, I'll just take anything. They're the ones who don't ask questions, who maybe don't push back or clarify information. So you can actually signal, because recruiting is so psychological and people are making people decisions. You can signal to the company that you're valuable by coming across as someone who has value. So, okay, thank you for listening to my TED Talk there. But anyway, back to my contractor journey. So here's a weird thing that happened to me. I ended up getting reached out to directly on LinkedIn from a hiring manager at Amazon about a contract opportunity that he had. He ended up having me go through the staffing agency. But the funny thing is, he had seen me posting on LinkedIn regularly. So wink, wink, that's a really good thing to do. I was sharing, I was commenting. I mean, people talk about LinkedIn as like Facebook for jobs. And so to think about it that way can actually really help. You think of like which friends are top of mind, and they're the ones that are really active on, well, my Facebook actually got hacked and it's now deleted, but you get what I'm saying. I was also posting like, hey, I'm this awesome recruiter. I'm at this recruiting convention this week, learning a whole lot of good stuff. So anyway, he'd seen my activity, reached out to me about this opportunity he had on his team. It did happen to be a contract role, but luckily I knew what to ask. How long's the contract? How likely are you to convert this to a permanent role? That was important for me to know. So ask that. The thing is, I think every company is going to tell you, oh, well, we usually convert our contractors. More on that in a minute, but just be wary because anyone's going to tell you like, oh, of course, we'd love to convert you. Most contractors actually don't end up getting converted. There's a reason for that, and I'll get into that in a second. In my experience with Amazon within the recruiting world, they kind of use the contract opportunity as a way to see if anyone kind of rises above who might be sort of iffy. And I think to them, I look probably sort of iffy on my resume. Can you handle it? Can you handle tech recruiting? Can you handle working insanely high volume, large scale, high impact, all that stuff? And to be really honest, most of the contract recruiters that I was working with didn't end up getting the opportunity to even interview full time. But don't worry, I've got your back. I can tell you how I ended up getting that opportunity. I'm going back to Jacqueline had some good questions here that I want to make sure I kind of.
Yeah, I can even just off of some of the things you've said, like a little bit on pushback and clarifying questions. I think one of the things I kind of saw contract roles, but they were really actually intimidating to me because and I didn't pursue them when I had this huge employment gap. And some of that was it was maybe 3 months, and I was like, how can I actually go in there and have impact when I'm also onboarding in that 3 months?
Yeah.
So there's a
Figuring
little bit
out how to
of
use your
a
computer
fear factor on particularly if you're trying to pivot into something new and it's going to be the first time you've done something. Do you have any insights on a little bit more about like what does that pushback look like? Because I wrote down like to push back and ask clarifying questions, and if you're kind of approaching the job role because it scares you, but you're doing it anyway. So there is that natural insecurity, like, well, I think I can do the job, but and now we have to present an interview situation or scenario as really confident, like I know I can do the job. It's a strong mental shift right there. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what types of things do you push back on and what types of questions you might ask.
Yeah, so I asked questions like so especially with Amazon, because they're so data driven, when I interviewed, so I have to say, this is my happily ever after story, because I'm actually friends with this guy who ended up hiring me in real life. He's no longer my boss. I don't work at Amazon anymore. An amazing human. And I never want to give the impression like Amazon's this horrible place. I met people who've become real life friends, including the person who reached out to me initially and hired me and took that chance. So having said that, as far as things that I grilled him, I'm surprised we're still friends, because that first interview, I was like, what does success look like in this role specifically? Like, how do you measure success? And as a recruiter, so I was asking things like how many, we call them requisitions, but like how many jobs would be assigned to me and how long does it usually take to fill them? What would your expectations be like for my initial time to fill? Hey, this contract starts out 3 months. What would you have wanted me to accomplish 2 months in as we're starting to evaluate, and how can this contract be extended? So it turns out my contract ended up getting extended to the maximum length, 11 months. After 11 months, Amazon either converts you or you have to take a 3-month waiting period. So I really dug into, because I'm thinking, I got to feed my babies. So really dug into how do you measure success? What does that look like? And then also work environment is really important to me. And to be honest with you, I heard some really iffy things about Amazon culture and especially Amazon recruiter culture. And so I asked, once I clarified, hey, this is what success looks like. This is what the volume looks like in the job. I said, great. So 2 hires a quarter or whatever, like senior software engineers. Okay. Maybe I can do that. But what happens if I didn't? And how else do you measure success? So he gave me the coolest answer. I'll just share it here because I just think this is such a signal of potentially a great boss. So when I had said, what's success and how do you measure it? And he's like, 2 hires a quarter or whatever, blah, blah, blah. How do you get there? Well, this is what you do. This is what the expectations are like. This is the workload. Okay. So what happens if I fall short? He said that the first thing he does is reflect back on himself and think of, he said he knows he hires great people. So if I'm not meeting the bar, then he has to think about how he might have let me down in training, in onboarding, how he could support me better. And he'll actually go back and ask me where the gaps are that he can help fill. Like what a cool human. I was like, I am now dying to work for this guy. He sounds like an amazing boss and a great person. And I saw that in action with him too. He really would really try to make things work. I would say with contractors though, in general, they're sort of a dismissive, you'll make it or you won't. Not everyone is as awesome as my friend Matt. So I would say not to expect that. But if you're interviewing in general, one thing I tell my candidates to ask too, I'm like, yeah, you interview my hiring managers right back, ask them what success looks like, how that's measured. And then also one great signal or like a great way to winkle out what the environment and culture is really like. What happens when people don't meet their goals? I interviewed with another team at Amazon and the manager said, well, I moved them right to corrective action. And I was like, so you have a bad day, you get written up like that. I was like, okay, I won't be working for them. So again, it's such a huge company and there's just a large variety of experiences under such a large umbrella. And these were just my unique experiences, but those are things I recommend asking. And then I also asked, and I'm really glad I asked this for Amazon particularly, I asked, how else is success measured beyond just hires? And he's like, oh, well, I'm glad you asked that. And then also most companies are, because they want culture fit is becoming more and more important. And although that's another topic I have things to say about. Yeah, but for Amazon, they live and breathe the leadership principles, especially people who have been there for a while. It is seriously woven into everything. And so when I asked about like, how else do we measure success? Then he was able to, this hiring manager was able to dive into, well, we're really looking for strong leadership principles. So like almost anybody could eventually deliver results. But as far as how else we're looking at whether or not you're successful and whether or not you should be converted to a full-time role or have your contract extended, it's going to be things like having a high level of ownership, speaking up in meetings, thinking of new ways to recruit talent. So, invent and simplify. I'm going back into the leadership principles, but those are other good questions to ask through the interview process. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, it
I would just
does.
say anything that is worrying to you, don't be afraid to call it out and just ask.
Those are such good points. I was in an interview once, and two, and then one, like at the like we were talking about the role and what it looked like, and then he just kind of told me, I'm really just trying to build a kind and curious team. And that's the kind of person that just made me gravitate towards, well, how could I not want to work on a team if that's the principles that they're building it on? And then, I had another one where I was like, well, how do you prioritize learning here? And that was the most eye-opening question I could have asked, because he got very candid, and I appreciate it, because it really showed me that there were red flags all over the place while he was talking, because it seemed like there wasn't actually a priority on work-life balance, much less learning. And so it goes back to, when you're having these conversations, don't ignore the red flags. Like, do not ignore the red flags. Because I had to step back after that interview and be like, wow, if I got the job offer, would I take it? And I was like, not without another conversation with the hiring manager. I'll tell you that, because this was a person on his team. So you are empowered in these situations to make the best choice for yourself. If you don't mind, and this is because I would like to step a little bit back, and can you explain, like, agency recruiting or not recruiting, but just roles and what that looks like? Because I know there's a principle of, there's the contract, and the company is getting paid to fill the contract, and they offer benefits and whatnot with that. Usually, I think, at least the basics of healthcare and things like that, which is great. Can you give a little bit more insight, if nobody's ever heard of a vendor role? Like, what can you expect as a vendor?
Yeah, so you end up being like, I was hired by the Populous Group. So I worked in Amazon building. I had a green contractor badge, but it's like, I have an Amazon badge with my name on it. But I was employed by the Populous Group. That's the company that Amazon was using to hire its contract recruiters through. So I wasn't hired by Amazon.com. The Populous Group did provide me with benefits. You can expect that contractor benefits may not be great. Like, my deductible was a lot for medical benefits, for example, but it was still nice to just have some kind of benefits, as long as I was a contractor. Also, wait, you were asking as far as the nuts and bolts. So I would submit my timesheet, because I was hourly through the Populous Group. And then as far as how the Populous Group got paid, Amazon paid them. Amazon is like, thank you for giving us Emily. You can manage her benefits, her timesheet, and paying, and anyway, so Amazon would pay the Populous Group, and then the Populous Group would pay me. One thing that I didn't know, and I know it can really vary by company, is I made really good money per hour as a contractor. And some of my teammates did too. So you can actually make, so it's funny. I'm going to be really honest. And I think we all need to talk about money a lot more, especially women, and underrepresented folks. So I made less, once I broke it down, per hour when I converted to a permanent role at Amazon than I did as a contractor. And then I also was able to get overtime pay. So I helped with some recruiting events and some special projects. And I, of course, ran this by my manager. But my hourly pay, especially with overtime, ended up being more per year than I made once I converted to a full-time role. Hey, the peace of mind with the full-time permanent role, that was pretty great. The benefits were better, the opportunities, things like that. And then there were a few things I want to say about being a contractor too. So how does that sound as far as like how the agency works? I never really met them.
That sounds good, because again, it's a little bit of a mystery world.
It is.
Like, it's a 3-month job, 6-month job. That's kind of weird. Yeah. But there are opportunities for renewal, and even if you're not renewed, I know some of our vendors kind of go dark, so they're just not on the official system. And I don't really know all the nuts and bolts about what that is, but they still continue to do their job. They still continue to get paid. It's just some magic that happens in the back scenes, and I'm like, okay, so you're in your dark period. I don't know what that means.
I don't know. So what happens is, from a practical point of view, a company, once you reach 11 months. So I'm going to speak about this very badly. So you can just Google this later or ask your attorney. But there's a legal issue where if you work more than a certain period of time, the company is legally required to give you benefits. That's why most companies will only keep you contract. Like Amazon's policy is 11 months, because if you work more than 11 months as contract, they might be obligated to provide you with benefits or something else. Anyway, so anyway, you have to have like a 3-month. Some people that I knew actually would only work contract for Amazon. They'd work like 9 months on, 3 months off. Then they come back 9 months on, 3 months off. There are some big downsides with contract recruiting is actually they can let you go at any time. I mean, technically anybody could probably be let go at any time with at-will employment and how that all works these days. But just keep that in mind. You are taking a risk. And that was so scary to me that leads into point number 2. But it's good. Don't worry. There's hope. So companies, they're not hiring you as a contractor just for fun. Like they want to see if you can cut the mustard, if you can do really well. And they will, they'll kind of use that. Sometimes you're hired just for a project. But let me tell you, these companies, if you're awesome, they will want to hire you. They will probably figure out a way. I'm saying probably because there's always something weird with the economy. But like in every case that I saw and that have still seen, if you are an awesome contractor, they are like, jackpot, let's hire this person, and they will do what they can. So there are a couple things that you can do to really ensure your spot as a strong contractor and or someone who gets a permanent role offered to them. One, I don't know if any of you have seen the news this week, but Kim Kardashian is promoting the new Kardashian show on Hulu. This is related, I promise. But there's this clip that's going viral where she's talking about like people just need to get up and work, and they need to work harder if they want to be successful. And the internet is dragging her. I don't want to come across as a Kim Kardashian right now, but I outworked everybody. I outworked the contractors. I just put in so much work. I put in more hours. I put in more effort. I even put my heart into my work. I gave it everything I had. I worked as if this were my golden opportunity because I kind of knew that it was. And I had so much on the line if I did and didn't make this work out. And I worked that way. And I would get comments on like, you work so hard. And my hiring managers and my managers at Amazon all saw that and recognized it. So sorry to be a Kim today, but like there was no replacement really for just working really hard. The other thing is, again, hiring is like people hire people, and it's kind of psychological. But from day one, I was like, I'm going to forget that I'm a contractor and I'm 100% part of this team. If there's a potluck, I'm there with a big dish with a bow on top. If there's a joke, I'm in on it. If there is a meeting that they need someone to bring coffee to, I will pick up coffee. If there is like everything, I got to know everyone's dogs in the office, and I didn't do this strategically. I was just doing this because I'd never been a contractor before. And my work was always kind of like my work friends, my work family. We spent a lot of time here. And I didn't know it until afterwards, but no one wants to fire their friend. And even a few months in, I was already fully embedded in the team. I was one of the team. So don't underestimate just being like extra friendly, going out of your way. And I know a lot of us are still working virtually. Set up virtual coffee chats. Even with people on different teams, make connections, just get to know people the best you can. And anytime there's an opportunity to just embed yourself a little bit more into the team, take it. Because again, it's like people want to hire people that they like. So don't underestimate like the social part of being a contractor. And that's a big miss. I sat next to a contractor who essentially did none of the things that I did. So he would come in late for meetings. He would leave early every day. And not to say that that's bad, but he just gave a certain impression that way as far as work goes. And then personally, he didn't socialize with anyone. And so when his contract was up, it was just like, bye, Bob. just, oh, a contractor that came in and out. And with me, it was like, Emily, how's your mom doing? Did she ever, find the scooter she was looking for? Because, I'm like and we're all following each other on Instagram. So by this point, it would be weird if, if they let me go. Having said that, it also gave me great opportunities by working that way to, once it came time to interview for a permanent role, or if Amazon hadn't been able to interview me, then if I'm back in the job search. I almost just cussed for real. Then maybe if I'm back in the job search, if you don't have projects that you own or things that you were doing, if you were only working as a contractor, one of the big downsides that I see on the hiring side is that contractors often don't have a high level of ownership. So this is going to be, Jacqueline, is this over at 11:30? I want to be mindful.
It's 11:30. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay. So I wanted to mention this up front from the hiring side, and I hope this isn't too much of a tangent, but something that I think is really critical to know. If you're considering a contract opportunity, not only, work hard, Kim Kardashian, and make friends with everybody, but also think about what you can own. Now, it can be hard because you're a contractor, but one of the things you might want to consider before taking a contract role is it can, depending on the role, the opportunity, and this can be something good to ask about in the interview process, is that if you don't go the extra mile or get the opportunity to own anything, I'll tell you what it looks like on the hiring side. Okay, so so this is true story. I'm hiring highly specialized technical program managers for Netflix. I had to think for a second. I've been talking a lot about Amazon. So with that, let's say I have two. This is just made up, so don't come for me. Let's say I have two people who apply. One's been a program manager on a contract at Apple. One's been a program manager permanent at Apple, same amount of time. As a contractor at Apple, for example, you might only be allowed to access certain systems, work on certain things, and you're a contractor. You could come and you could quit at any time too. They probably are only letting you work on one part of a project or program, so you can't speak to leading something from start to finish, what you learned from it, and really show your full capabilities. And so my hiring managers as well, when they see contract on a resume, it's not necessarily a no-go, but that's usually the first thing that they want me to dig into. Okay, Emily, yeah, sure, we'll interview them, but what have they really owned, or are they just an order taker? Especially the further you get in your career, contractors often are kind of order takers. You come in to solve a problem, you get orders, you fill orders. So just think about that on your resume too. If you've been doing contract roles, cool, not to worry. Me too. Just put my best tip is put, like, let's say I worked contract at Apple. On my resume, I'd actually put Apple and then like contract role, something like that. So you have the big name. Don't put the name of the agency, like Populous Group, Apple. It's just like, you want that big name. You worked on those premises. You worked on, with that company, but do call out the fact that it's contract. Having said that, try to have some bullet points around things you did that weren't just taking orders or just doing the basic job functions. Because going back to why I couldn't make the leap until I took a contract role, I didn't have anything on my resume up till then that actually showed a high level of ownership and that I really thought outside the box and that I did more than my job. And in this market, if I were just doing my job, I wouldn't be a really strong candidate. Companies can and want to hire somebody who's going to bring more than just average, especially big tech. They're like, well, that's great, but we've just had 3,500 recruiters apply. What are you specifically and above and beyond going to bring to the table? So I know that was kind of a rant, but just consider that a contract opportunity could, especially if you do them just repeatedly, 3 to 6 months at a time over and over and over again, what could you put on your resume and what would you be able to speak to in an interview if you just keep doing short stints? Okay, that was the downside. I'm going to go back.
I actually have a great question, but I do want to make sure our audience, if anybody has, again, if you have questions, please, there's a raise your hand feature, or you can come on camera if you're comfortable. Don't feel like you're obligated. If anybody has questions, please. We
Yeah,
actually got one,
I
right?
see
When I
one.
was
Yeah,
ask
yeah.
questions. As a
Yeah,
long-term contractor, how can you ask to own more in your current role?
I would just say that. So personally, I'm pretty upfront. So I would say, let's say my manager's name is Mary. Hey Mary, I'm just make it positive. Like I'm loving my time here, and I just want to dig in even deeper to the work. Maybe even come with suggestions. Like, hey, and that's what I did at Amazon. I was like, hey, we're not doing any recruiting events, and I'd love to help kick those off. I've done those previously at my last company. We saw some success, so make a little case for it instead of like, Mary, I just want to own more. It's like, okay, like,
Well, that's what I would think. It also huge opportunity. And this is something just what I've experienced on my team is we have more work than we have people. So if anybody wants to be that, I guess Netflix calls that like the captain or something like that. If somebody wants to captain something, then especially if it's a problem that needs to be solved and you want to put in that extra effort, then that's going to stand out. It came to mind immediately on that.
yeah, or like what's
like,
not being
there's a
done that needs to be
problem.
done.
Yes. So I guess one thing that, and this is a little bit of a pivot. So if you're not prepared and you say, we have to table that for next time or something. When you talk about things you own in the resume, because I've seen some advice on LinkedIn and, I have to try and filter, is this good advice? Is this great advice? Should I pass it on or should I not? But some of it is, don't re-describe the job description in your resume, which kind of is a little bit weird because you're like, well, we're supposed to tailor it to the job description too. But it almost seems like people know what a program manager does in my role or what a
Same with the recruiter. You hire people.
Yeah. So make the bullet points the things you actually owned, and that might be a great opportunity. I guess I'm asking, would you concur with that statement? Is that the best way to look at a resume when you have, especially if you have like a 6-month contract here and then maybe you switch to a different company because you wanted to try something new, and it could look like you're not focused, but that's not true. It's like I might be still looking for what is that perfect right thing for me.
So one thing that I coached a friend to do recently who had done a lot of short contract roles, and this may not apply to anyone here on this chat, so sorry, but they had done so many short gigs that it's like it's like 3 pages of 3 months here, 1 week here, da 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 da. So I was like, hey, couldn't you just put contract or whatever it is, contract program manager, various companies, and then do sort of a high level overview of what you've done so that it doesn't look like, so you don't have 3 pages of really, really short stints that don't tell a story, because that's what we're trying to gather from the resume is what's your story, what's your impact. But if you have been, I think this is more to the point, if you have been somewhere for 6 months or so and you want to talk about it on your resume, awesome. The best way that you can show that you're someone who has ownership and impact is to have data on your resume. This is the most powerful tip, and one reason why I believe that it was so hard for me to get a job in these tech companies in Seattle, because I had this resume that was describing myself and describing the work that I did. But these companies aren't going to take a risk. No one's looking at a resume like, wow, she's customer service oriented and really nice. They're like, first and foremost, can you deliver results? I mean, it's like Amazon, like, are you going to raise the bar? Are you going to be an exceptional hire? And how do we know that up front? Well, you're going to prove it. How can you prove it before they even talk to you? You're going to use data on your resume. So as a contractor, try to measure your own like efforts and outcomes, even if you have to estimate, especially as a contractor, because you may not have access to all the same systems. It might feel a little bit like a pain, but maybe even just on your personal laptop, have a spreadsheet of like little projects that you've done and what the estimated or measurable impact or outcome was. Like hosted a recruiting event for people in tech. Goal was 10 attendees and 15 attendees came. I don't know, these are really bad on the fly examples, but just anything that shows that you did more than what was asked or achieved greater things than the goal. Using data as a contractor is really great. And not forgetting as you're working as a contractor to write down your own examples, because one thing I see really commonly as a recruiter is that everyone thinks they're going to remember their examples. So all my candidates, I offer to prep them. And I'm now, it's like almost 100%, where the ones that take me up on prep, they have more of that humble, like, yes, I'd love to hear your insights. I'm willing to write things down. And then the other ones who are like, no, I'm great. I'm good. I'm going to remember everything. I've got it. I don't need to hear your little tips. And then inevitably they'll forget their own examples. They don't know how to interview for our company uniquely, that kind of thing. So sorry, the whole point was take any prep that's offered to you and write down your own examples ahead of time for any interviews. That was kind of a rant.
One of the, like, on that line, one of the things I do is if I'm in an interview at all, or even if I just, there's sometimes, I think you even put a post once where it's like, these are the screening questions that I do when I talk to somebody on LinkedIn. Well, I immediately saved that, and I have a OneNote, or, you know, you can use any file. I saved the post. Then I went and added those to my interview prep section, because I was like, this is gold. She's literally telling me what she's going to ask.
To expect.
If a candidate ever wants to move to the next round. So I have time to think about those examples when it's not live on an interview call. So even when I had an interview, as soon as the interview was over, I just opened that thing and I put what questions was I asked, because when it comes to interview prep, I now have a bank of these are the things I was actually asked in an interview, or that someone mentioned they actually ask in an interview. So there's no excuse for me in my next interview to at least not have those things answered. And then we're in a digital world. Like, do you know how easy it is to put, like, right now I have the questions I sent earlier to Emily in front of me in case we have a lull, which usually we don't in these sorts of things. But you can read your example. You can have it right in front of you during the interview. Just put it right below the camera so you're still making eye contact, but you thought through your examples, and now you don't have to scramble. And another thing is, like, one of the things I got sent when I was looking at switching teams was this whole questionnaire. What do you think is this and this and this? It turned out to be the actual live interview when the same questions were asked. Now, I did the wrong thing by trying to come up with new examples, because I assumed, oh, well, they read it already, so therefore I don't need to say the same thing. No, I absolutely could have said the same thing, because I don't know that they actually read it. Or if they remembered it, like, they might be looking at 15 candidates, and for me to go actually tell the same story, then it connects dots even. Oh, this is the one who also did blah, so, like, use those examples. And that's another reason why I'm such a fan of networking, is because people are putting gold on their LinkedIn page all the time. Follow recruiters, like, participate in the conversation, ask why that is a good question. You just show up in the feed and they don't forget you. They can't forget you.
I'll share right now my very favorite top #1 super cool interview tip. And when I had candidates do this, when I measured it for a time period, and I won't say the company because they don't like to share numbers, and that's cool. But I actually saw when my candidates did what I'm about to share with all of you for free today. I feel like I'm selling like sham. Wow. They were 3 times more likely to get an offer. So I would suggest to the candidates that they go to the dollar store or wherever and get poster board or printer paper, just some plain paper. And since we're all interviewing virtually for now, put it on the monitor behind, or on the wall behind their computer monitor, or wherever they could glance at it quickly and easily, so that they're not nervously flipping through a notebook. Now, if you're interviewing in person, bring a notebook. Some of my most senior candidates at Amazon, or I haven't worked in person with Netflix, but I've seen folks interviewing in person, they'll bring notes. So don't be shy about bringing notes. But my best tip is to, you can get 2 for $1 poster board, or if you have a whiteboard that you can put behind your monitor, have something, put it behind your monitor so that when you're interviewing, like Jacqueline already said, you can be quickly glancing at your examples. But what you want to do with that is, Amazon uses the STAR interview format, and put that in the chat so you can Google it. And you can also look for YouTube videos where people go through STAR examples. Don't get too tripped up on it. all this, and the reason why I'm sharing this is not just for Amazon, it's for everywhere. I helped family and friends and even some of my Amazon candidates, if Amazon wasn't a fit for them, get them jobs at so many other lucrative companies by using the STAR interview format. To me, it's like magic. So it stands for situation, task, action, result. So you're going to come to your interview with a few of your strong examples written out in the STAR format. So what that looks like is, I should have poster board here at my desk so I can explain it. But like, let's just say, now my background's blurred too, but like you've got a piece of paper and you write STAR going down, and you're going to write S star. So the situation was, we needed to hire more software engineers. These are terrible examples, by the way. I just wanted to give you an idea. But like, hey, Emily, tell us about a time when you solved a unique problem. I'm like, on it, star. I've got it all written down. The situation, here's the situation, here's the background, because giving a little bit of context, otherwise just saying like, well, yeah, I hired a lot of people. That was the problem and I solved it. Nope. Tell us your dragon slaying story. Hey, I'm in a competitive market in Seattle. My company was facing this crisis and shortage of talent. We couldn't kick off critical projects for Amazon Prime Video because we needed this, and that specific skill set. So then T, task. I've got that written down too. Doop. So the task at hand, this is what I decided to do. These are the tools that I use. Action, these are the actions that I took. These are the people that I brought in. Companies love to hear that too. Spoiler alert. So not just, oh, Emily is such a good worker. It's like Emily brings in teammates and asks other people for their opinions, for their buy-in. I brought up together multiple teams. These are the actions that I took. And then most critical, don't forget your R at the end, result. So, hey, in the end, I was 300% to my hiring goal every quarter based on the things that I did in the T and the A. And then also come with some learnings. Like this was the result, but with somewhere like Amazon, they might ask you, and actually Netflix as well, I've heard questions around like, hey, that's a great example. Tell us about some things you would do differently next time or some things that you learned. And one of the things that I loved about working at Amazon is they really embrace failure. They take that as a sign that you're growing and you're innovating. So I would always tell candidates to come with your failure story. Seriously, like a whopper if you want to, as long as you have a strong, here's what I learned from it. This is what I did differently next time, that kind of thing. And it would throw off candidates. And I've seen this at other companies too. I'm just picking on Amazon because it's like kind of on my heart today in a good way. So think about your failure stories and have a couple of those prepared. But I can't recommend highly enough having your examples written out in like maybe bigger, I was going to say font, but if you're writing it, I guess it's not font. Have those examples, write them out, put them behind your monitor, especially if you're in the middle of interviews. You want to have those ready no matter what company, because it really, I'm going to give you an example of when it can go wrong. I had a candidate interviewing recently who looked so good on paper, like on their resume, and in the interview was just not concise, wouldn't answer questions concisely. And the role partly had to do with communications. Most roles do, I guess. But anyways, we were like, we didn't get what we needed out of them. We didn't get specifics. We didn't get evidence that they would be awesome. So in the end, because we couldn't, one, they weren't a concise communicator. And two, they didn't give us the R. We got no results. We don't know if they'd be awesome. There was too much guessing. We even did a follow-up round with them to see if we could, and they just kept going way over time, blah, 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 like I'm doing now. So just write those examples down. I know I'm momming everyone so hard right now, but anytime a candidate's like, I've got it, I'll remember it, I don't need to write my stuff down, I'm a principal software engineer, like, and then they choke.
Yes, like, yes. That can't be said enough though. Like when interview nerves, you know, and I try to do this practice with myself. Like I'm not allowed to let myself get stressed and get nervous about things until it's actually time to be nervous for them. And you know, and I literally will be like, no, it's not time to be nervous for that. But then sometimes when I go live, like it's like all of those that I said, it's not time to get nervous now. It's like my brain says, actually, it is now. And it can really sideline really great thinkers into babbling silly people. So don't be that babbling silly people. Oh, we have another question coming. Thank you, by the way, for asking these. It's pretty hard to find out what agencies a company uses to fill their contract roles. Are you able to share what agencies Netflix uses or how to find contract roles there?
That's a great question. I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you what I don't know, and it's more of what I don't know. And then maybe some advice. So it is really hard to find out. I didn't know that Amazon used the Populous group. They also use a bunch of other agencies. That's just the one that I went through on my team for my recruiting role, blah, blah, blah. So the agency they use will depend on the type of role. So different agencies often specialize in different kinds of jobs. So like for me, when I was Googling search firms, Seattle, I remember Seattle Corporate Search, for example, they specialized, and they'll say on their website, like they specialize in a lot of like professional, my brain's starting to fade. I need a coffee or something. But anyway, having said that, Netflix, a lot of our jobs are under like within the entertainment industry. So they use some really unique contract companies, and I don't know the names of most of them. A lot of times what happens though is it's such a small, can be kind of a small world. So let's say, as far as how do you get a contract role at Netflix? It's a lot of times through networking. And let's say I'm making this up, my hiring manager, Mary, is working on a project with a producer and wants to hire them for a short-term contract to work on for Stranger Things. I don't know. And then they will get them, they'll get them hired through an agency that they use, but it's going to be different based on the type of role. It's different in the entertainment industry, and I have a lot to learn there. And so I actually don't know. I've seen different agency names, but these are all ones that I haven't been familiar with, and they seem to be really unique, where it's like this one specializes in marketing for trailers, like movie trailers. It's just really, really, really niche.
Or a makeup artist, or anything, because it is also a production studio. So your best people may be, I mean, if you think about a talent agency, if you wanted to be an actor, you'd probably sign up with a company that's then going to promote you. And I think a lot of that happens probably with, I'm guessing, I don't work for Netflix, but it's kind of entertainment industry is
weird. And if you're looking for a professional role, one like mine, like, hey, I want to be I don't want to be a producer for Stranger Things. I want to be a recruiter. I want to be a program manager or something. Every role is a professional role. But what I mean is like, your more typical desk job. So as far as how you would get your foot in the door, they don't hire those roles for wow, I was about to say that really weird. We don't, from what I've seen, typically use agencies and hire like contract recruiters, contract program managers, things like that. They tend to, and this is slowly changing. Netflix just started internships last year for the first time ever, which that tells you the story of up till now, Netflix really has typically only hired very senior talent, and they haven't been hiring junior talent. They know this. It's not a secret, so I'm not sharing something I shouldn't. Again, that culture is slowly changing because we really want to be more inclusive. We want to represent our members who are watching, and they're not all like almost 40 like me and this and that. We want to look and represent our members. So, and that means having a variety of ages. But this is cool. Lana put a note in here. I found a few agencies have reached out to me with contract roles. One was Cypress HCM. So there's a specific, but the good and bad news is, in order to get in with Netflix, I had to start 4 years ago. I had to take that contract role at Amazon, outwork everyone, go to all the potlucks, then convert to the permanent role, then put in a couple of years there. really prove myself in this role and at this scope and scale. And then a company like Netflix or Facebook or Google is like, aha, you are one of us. But they don't usually, it's unfortunate, but they don't typically take a risk or a chance. You usually do have to be more senior in your career, and there isn't a really good substitute for that. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I've been there, and I know I guess that's maybe a good way to tie things up. That's why taking a contract role can be your big break. It was my big break. I wouldn't be at Netflix if I hadn't done that grind and started as a contract recruiter at Amazon. And every 3 months when my contract would come up for renewal, I was really scared. And it was so stressful to me because of my family situation and everything. But if you are willing, this is what I believe, if you're willing to work like no one else does and speak up and provide a lot of value and act like a fully fledged team member, even as a contractor, you're going to have opportunities, even if it's not with that company that you're contracting with. Other people will, the term is stick their neck out. They will vouch for you. And even if Amazon hadn't been able to hire me, I had already made connections from within Amazon because of how I was working. So if it were my last day and I'm like, hey, Mary, it was really nice sitting next to you, and tell Peaches I said hi. Hey, if you know of anyone who is, I mean, hopefully it wouldn't be on my last day, but hey, you can use those connections you've made. People will make introductions for you. As my contract was coming to an end, Amazon was actually in a hiring freeze for recruiters because it was the pandemic. And people were jumping to be like, oh, I know someone at Zillow. Let me introduce you to my friend. She's hiring at Redfin. Hey, I think Google has contract recruiter roles. Let me put in a good word for you. So that can be the other, like, that's another silver lining. If you're willing to be that shiny superstar, it can lead to great connections in the industry either way. So anyway, Jacqueline, anything you wanted to add?
No, I just, we are pretty close to time here. I wanted to give people an opportunity, since we have two networks that have come colliding right here. If anybody has LinkedIn addresses they want to pop in chat, then you feel free to connect with one another. That's one of the reasons I do this, is to bring people together. And most of all, a big thank you for taking your time and sharing all these insights. It's been really fantastic. I wish I would have known all of this when I was trying to close this career gap. I really would have sped up all those things. And I guess the biggest takeaway is don't be scared of contract roles. But not the biggest takeaway, but that was for me, because I was so terrified of, I can't go in there and be like 3 months. What can I do? You
take the
won't know
interview.
what you do until you try. So,
Yep.
Like, get it in there. But yes, thank you, everyone who joined. I get excited anytime I see someone waiting in the lobby so I can let them in. So thank you. And then, like if you want, I do have off of my blog, the Witful Thinking. I'm repurposing my mailing list to let people know about what's coming up with Mentorship Live. So if you want future guests, I send an email on Monday or Tuesday to let people know who's coming up. Next week, we have Albert Bellamy. He has started the LinkedIn Hard Mode Challenge. That's how I stumbled across him somehow. And we're going to talk about having a presence on social media like LinkedIn to build the network that you want to build for yourself and to find
soon
those.
People will come to you and reach out to you about their jobs. That's kind of how I got in with Netflix.
Yep. Yeah. And especially putting yourself out there. So thank you. I just appreciate it so much for your time.
Yeah, nice to meet all of you. All right, I've got to run to another meeting. Hope you all have a good day. All right, bye.
I will leave the chat open just a little bit longer if anybody needs to click links, or if anybody has questions. I see some just like personal, like, thank you.